The attacks have become more severe, even targeting residential areas. At the same time that Putin is engaged in a bloody war with tragic consequences for the people of Ukraine, he is also engaged in a propaganda war. His disinformation campaign is geared towards, first, his own people, who have largely been kept in the dark about the atrocities of this war against Ukraine, and second, for the entire world. In justifying his war to the world, Putin has relied on the ridiculous claim that he is the appointed person to denazify Ukraine. The Russian government released a statement on March 1st through the Russian embassy in Canada stating, Russia continues its special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. The Russian army does not occupy Ukrainian territory and takes all measures to preserve the lives and safety of civilians. The strikes are targeting military facilities only, and the tasks to clear Ukraine of Nazism will be accomplished. Congressman Roy, there's a lot of evidence that Putin's army is targeting civilian targets.
I want to thank my friend from Colorado for this important time talking about the horrors that have been inflicted upon people by Vladimir Putin. Specifically, we know how much damage he's been causing to the people of Ukraine, more than 1.7 million. In fact, I saw a graphic just before I came to the floor. 2 million Ukrainians have been displaced, have been fleeing Ukraine for other countries nearby. Over 2,000 civilians have been killed, according to reports, but obviously we don't know the extent of the damage and the carnage. 38 children have been killed that we know of, but there's probably more. 70 wounded that we know of. $10 billion in damages in Ukrainian infrastructure, probably far more than that. 200 schools, 34 hospitals, and 1,500 residential homes destroyed. These are the basic numbers just coming in. We know they're going to be far greater. On Saturday, a family with 2 children, a teenage son and a daughter, who appeared to be 8 years old, and several other civilians were killed by a Russia military strike at an evacuation crossing point in a Kiev suburb as they were trying to flee Ukraine. Ukraine has required men to stay to defend their country, forcing families to make the unthinkable decision. One Ukraine woman said, quote, "It was very hard to have your husband stay home. You have to choose, save the kids or stay with him." I've heard from friends and read dozens of tragic stories in the past few days through friends of mine in Austin, Texas, who have gone to Ukraine to help people. I've been in touch through them with an orphanage in Kiev with upwards of 50 children, up to 14 infants up in the suburbs of North Kiev. And they are struggling. They are lacking food. They are lacking the materials to survive. And they're trying to figure out how to get to a place where they can get to help. We have actors on the ground trying to help them, but they can't get to them because of what Putin is doing in not really heeding the calls for helping people be able to get out of harm's way. Right now, these children are completely helpless. A nurse from Luck in western Ukraine who fled to Poland said the decision on whether to stay or go was not instantaneous. When the Russian army first invaded eastern Ukraine, she and her husband decided to wait. We were hoping that the situation wouldn't develop into a full-scale invasion. But as hours passed, it became obvious that things were only getting worse. The next morning, her 2-year-old son, Timmy, got in a car and headed for Poland, where they waited 10 hours wait at the border. She said saying goodbye to their husband and father, who stayed in Ukraine to build barricades, was heartbreaking. Her and her son were hosted by a Polish family, Robert and Hannah, an English language university instructor and a human resources supervisor who lived with their 2 children. They made it clear that their hospitality didn't have an end date. Alex in Kiev is helping his friends evacuate. Sergei in Rivne is setting up shelters for his community and providing food and supplies. Peter in Kaitmar packed his car yesterday and is currently taking his neighbors to Poland.
I think it's worthwhile to take a look at who this leader is. Who is Vladimir Putin? He began his career, not surprisingly, Congressman, at the KGB. He came to power in 2000, winning the presidency after having served as the Secretary of the Security Council of Russia and as the Director of the Federal Security Service. Putin served as president until 2008, when he was constitutionally prohibited from seeking a 3rd term. But Putin had little regard for the Russian Constitution, and he orchestrated a maneuver in which one of his yes men would be installed as the new president and Putin would assume the role of prime minister. After serving as Russia's top leader, but in the capacity as prime minister, Putin then did the unthinkable and ran again as president in 2012. With protests and allegations of mass fraud in his background, he assumed another 6-year term and then again ran in 2018. Even more alarming, in April of last year, Putin signed into law a series of constitutional amendments that would permit him to run for president 2 additional terms, serving a total of 36 years. Putin's regime has become increasingly totalitarian, and Putin himself has put the KGB background to use, employing Soviet-era repressions against the people of Russia. He has cracked down on free speech, seized control of the media, and had his opponents and critics assassinated. Congressman, I know you feel strongly about how President Putin has put his KGB background to use.
Well, we are seeing Putin's propaganda tactics as we speak. The world is seeing it in full display. His regime is systematically shutting down the free flow of information surrounding this brutal war in Ukraine. The state-run newspapers in Russia have been instructed not to use the words invasion or war. Just days ago, Putin's regime shut off Facebook access in the country. Now, again, whatever Russians are able to see what we're saying on the floor, this is the truth. This is the truth of what Vladimir Putin is doing to the truth and the dissemination of information of what's happening in Russia, what's happening to the people of Ukraine, not the propaganda you're hearing in Russia. Just days ago, Putin's regime shut off Facebook, as I said. The Russian newspaper, translated as New Newspaper, has a brave, freedom-loving editor-in-chief, Dmitry Muratov, who co-won last year's Nobel Peace Prize, has been forced to remove all of the material on the newspaper's website related to Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Think about that. That's what's happening. This isn't new. It's his track record. He came to power because of a terrorist act that was directed at Russia's own people. In 1999, 3 apartment buildings in Moscow, Dagestan, and Volgodonetsk, those bombings, allegedly the acts of Chechen terrorists, gave a pretext for going into Chechnya for a second war, thus solidifying support for Putin as head of Security Council. Since then, almost everyone who has raised questions about these bombings or has attempted to investigate the cause of these bombings has been kicked out of Russia, imprisoned, or murdered. Those are the facts. That's who Putin is. During his more than 2 decades of ruling Russia, Putin has displayed a callous disregard for human life. He has engaged in murderous attacks on his political opposition. In 2004, the Putin regime poisoned Ukrainian presidential candidate Viktor Yushchenko. In 2006, there was the polonium killing in London of Alexander Litvinenko, a defector from Russia. In 2009, Sergei Magnitsky was taken into police custody, beaten, deprived of medical care, and he died in jail. In 2013, Boris Berezovsky was found in his home in the United Kingdom, dead. Berezovsky had long been a critic of Putin, accused the Kremlin of orchestrating the killing of Alexander Litvinenko, who had been poisoned in 2009. In 2015, Boris Nemtsov was shot 4 times in the back, just a short distance from the Kremlin. He was another critic of Putin. And in 2017, the world was horrified by the daylight shooting of Denis Vornenkov, who was murdered in Kiev after renouncing his Russian citizenship and criticizing Vladimir Putin. That is the truth of Putin's brutality.
And Congressman, I just want to go through one of these slides again, if I can. Let me hand you this. So I don't know if you got to look at this, but this is the before and after.
Yep.
This is a Russian man who left, went to England, was poisoned, and this is what he looked like before, and that's poisoned with radioactive materials. Radioactive material. He's poisoned, and that's how he looks afterwards. Unbelievable that one human being can do this to another human being, much less a leader of a major nuclear power in the world.
Is there any disagreement on the intelligence that this is what occurred at the hands of Vladimir Putin's orders?
Right. No disagreement in the world. And what is so significant is when Vladimir Putin says this is what's happening in Ukraine, who can believe him?
Right.
In fact, you can pretty much go to Vegas and bet your money on the opposite of what this man says. If he's able to do something like this, he is, one, he's a coward, and two, he's a monster. During his more than 2 decades of ruling Russia, Putin has displayed a callous disregard for human life. As part of Putin's war on Chechnya, he ordered the destruction of Chechnya's capital, Grozny. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed in this brutal assault. In 2008, Putin waged another war, this time in Georgia, another former part of the Soviet Union. The Georgian president, during Putin's assault in 2008, had this to say in the Wall Street Journal. And Congressman, I want you to really hear this because it is so unbelievable how similar what the Georgian president said in 2008 is to the game plan that Putin has orchestrated in Ukraine.
Yep.
Long before its conventional assault on Georgia, Russia openly backed separatist militants, that sounds familiar, launched cyber attacks, and used disinformation to meddle in the internal affairs of sovereign states. Initial intelligence reports of Russian forces gathering Georgian territory didn't even cause enough concern to order Georgian military officials back from their holidays. But in August 2008, under the auspices of securing the separatist enclave, Russia invaded my country. Leaving aside the practical impossibility of Georgia attacking a nuclear power 100 times its size, the entirety of the conflict took place on internationally recognized Georgian territory. The Kremlin's claim that its land forces mobilized overnight in response to an emergency was absurd. Such an onslaught required careful preparation, especially given the mountainous terrain of the Russian-Georgian border. And I think what's really important to point out here is that President Putin has used the exact same plan, the exact same formula, down to the T, claiming that there are Russian-speaking people, and he's trying to protect those people in Ukraine, down to the absurd claim that Ukraine is a Nazi government now. All these claims are made up. They're nonsense to try to justify in the minds of the Russian people what Putin is engaged in.
That is exactly right. And I want to take 1 minute because it merits repeating. Because we're sitting here in the United States of America in the protection of our great republic, miles away from what's happening in Ukraine. And it bears repeating that there are 2 million Ukrainians right now fleeing Ukraine, fleeing their homes. We have fortunately haven't had to experience that sort of thing. But 2 million people right now are fleeing their homes. Dads and husbands staying behind in Ukraine, families fleeing, seeking shelter. Thousands killed, we don't know how many. Children killed. Billions of dollars of damage, destroying crops, destroying infrastructure, taking over nuclear power plants. And I just got a text, literally as I'm standing here, from my friends in Austin, Texas, from the wife whose husband is currently now in Ukraine, trying to help people. Talking about the orphanage I talked about in northern Kiev. 51, she says, 51 kids trapped. 51 kids trapped. Do you have kids? I assume the speaker, people around here, many of us have kids. 51 kids trapped after orphanage bombed and director killed. So the director of the orphanage was killed. Running out of food, no heat or electricity, cold front coming. We'll freeze or starve if we can't get there soon. 15 infants. 15 infants. Special needs kids. Currently shelling of all civilian targets being perpetrated and carried out by Putin. The same Putin that killed a Ukrainian leader with a nuclear poisoning. This from my friend. We are pleading for someone to help us get to the children before it's too late. And we're trying. Anybody out there watching? We're trying to figure out how to get this orphanage and get them to people who can help. But that is the product of Vladimir Putin. And if you're watching this, and if you're in Russia, or if this clip gets to you and it isn't cut off by Putin and his thug leadership in Russia, this is the truth of Vladimir Putin. This is what he's doing to innocent people. And he's lying to you that these children are being put up as somehow being a front and being put up to be put in harm's way. He's indiscriminately bombing. He's the cause of these children being in danger. He's the cause of this murder. He's the cause of thousands of people getting killed, millions getting displaced, billions in damage. And it's all because he is a thug and an autocrat who is going after and killing innocent people.
An immoral person does not wage a moral war, does not poison people, does not continue to commit the war crimes and the illegalities. Murdering a political opponent just blocks away from the Kremlin. That kind of immoral person doesn't have the standing to talk to the world about what's going on in Ukraine. I know, Congressman, you were a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor. When we had a criminal defendant who lied, that was a special treat because we got to put witnesses on the stand, and we called it a false exculpatory. And Vladimir Putin has gone through his entire political career using false exculpatories, telling people that one thing happened when in fact the other thing, something else happened. And the reason it's so important to point out false exculpatories is it is a sign of guilt. And in this case, Vladimir Putin knows what he's doing is in violation of international law. He has committed numerous war crimes through his military, indiscriminately bombing civilian targets, and he is a war criminal, and he should be brought to justice. But my question to you now is, Congressman, are we doing everything we can as a country to make sure that we bring this thug, as you put it, this animal who is violating international law, killing children, destroying billions of dollars worth of infrastructure in the Ukraine? Are we as Americans, are we as civilized world, working with Western Europe, working with NATO, are we doing everything we can to bring this man to justice and to stop the tragedy that's going on in Ukraine?
Well, I appreciate my friend from Colorado's question, and I would note in your comparison as to our experience as federal prosecutors that there is no entity that's able to hold him to account in Russia because he's running the whole show as a dictator, and there is no free press. In our country, as bad as the press can be, we at least hope that we can get the truth out through the vestiges of the First Amendment and the importance of the free press, no matter who is in the White House, right?
Yes.
Neither you nor I shied away from criticizing the former president of the United States despite the fact he had an R after his name. Nor will we shy away from criticizing this president. He has a D after his name. Why? Because we're Article 1 and he's Article 2. And the founders gave us a free press to say we're going to have the press holding all of us to account and separation of power so we can hold the president to account. There is none of that here.
And one more thing, when the press holds us to account, we stand up. We may disagree with them. We may offer another version of the facts, but we don't shut down the press.
Right.
We don't close their doors. We don't turn off the TV station when they call something a war. When they call a war, we don't shut them down. That's exactly what's happening in Russia right now.
And the most important thing we can do, in my opinion, is doing what we're doing right here, and I hope all my colleagues will do this, and I hope everybody will unite, and I hope the American free press will unite, and the worldwide free press will unite to call this out for what it is. A war criminal killing innocents for sheer power and for sheer determination of what he wants for his own agenda, not for any kind of honorable reasons in defending his homeland. Whatever he is telling you and the people of Russia, that this is somehow an honorable defense of Russia, it is not. He is lying to you. He is killing innocent people in the name of your homeland. And you need to know that. And you need to know the truth. And you need to see what he's doing to people. And we in this country need to continue to do more. And I know we're here to talk about Putin, and we're here to talk about this situation, holding him accountable. And I don't want to get too partisan here, but our country should have been doing more sooner. We should have been listening to Zelensky. I've heard a whole lot of applause lately of Zelensky from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But where were we last July when he was asking for help with sanctions? Where were my colleagues on the other side of the aisle when my former boss and my friend, Senator Ted Cruz, forced a vote in the Senate on Nord Stream 2? MIA, partisan vote. We're not going to continue sanctions on Nord Stream 2. We're going to go along with Biden's decision to stop sanctions on Nord Stream 2. Well, what do you think happens when you allow Putin and Russia to have a complete control of the energy supply of Europe? What do you think is going to happen when you empower a thug and a dictator? What do you think is going to happen? And right now today, we have a complete refusal of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and frankly, too many colleagues on my side of the aisle who refuse to say that we are today going to open up American energy, liquefied natural gas, oil, and produce it in this country to ensure that this man doesn't have the power to do what he's doing in Ukraine.
And to go back a little bit in history, Madam Speaker, how much time do we have left?
The gentleman has 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. To go back a little bit in history, when President Putin invaded Crimea, President Obama refused to give lethal assistance to Ukraine. It wasn't until President Trump came in that lethal assistance was given to Ukraine. And then, to President Biden's credit, he ramped up that lethal aid as the threat got greater. And we have seen a great deal of lethal aid going to the Ukraine military. They're using it wisely. They're fighting a courageous war against a much, much greater military power. But I agree with you, Congressman. We could be doing more. We could be sanctioning more the source of Russia's money, their income, their revenue for waging this war, and we should be doing that. And one of the areas, just one of them, we should be doing more in banking. We should be doing more in trade, in blockades. But one of the ways that we can sanction them is by producing more natural gas, more fossil fuels here at home. We should be shipping liquefied natural gas to our allies in Western Europe to wean them off the reliance on energy from Russia.
How has a lawless authoritarian managed to regain his power? Well, I'll tell you, Europe made themselves completely dependent on Russian energy. And if you want a wake-up call and you want a warning shot in this country, Russia controls 40% of the EU's natural gas and 30% of its oil. Germany buys more gas from Russia than any other country. They chose this. They chose fracking bans. They chose to shut down energy freedom in Western Europe. They chose to pursue a political climate ideology over national security and common sense and energy for their citizenry. And now they're beholden to Russia. And now we've empowered Russia. This stuff matters. Wars have been fought over these kinds of things, and we just empowered an autocrat to roll over the people of Ukraine because of the leadership of the Democrats on the other side of the aisle and the people in this White House are pursuing climate ideology over national security, climate ideology over energy freedom, climate ideology over affordable gas and the ability for the American people to thrive while empowering the people of Ukraine instead of a thug like Putin.
And in addition to that, it is time that our allies in NATO step up,
Amen.
Spend the money they're supposed to spend on their military, on their defense structure, and move forward with us. It is not time for Americans to constantly fight wars in other countries when other countries haven't stepped up and recognized the dangers of a man like Vladimir Putin. The head of the German military, I don't know if it's the equivalent of our Secretary of Defense or our Army Chief of Staff or maybe the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but the head of the German military mocked his own military, talking about how unprepared they would be in the event of a conflict with Russia. Putin knows that. Putin has intelligence agents, and they have scoured the Western European countries. They know exactly what the strength is of those countries. They know what their willingness is to fight, and they have made a decision Putin has made a decision that he can take Ukraine with very little consequence. That is a serious issue.
You're exactly right. And tomorrow we're going to be voting on a number of things. I got to be honest with you. I am sickened at what we're doing in this body. Instead of debating and voting here and having a serious discussion about how we should spend our assets to support Ukraine, but be sensible about what we're doing in policies here, we're going to have a vote on banning Russian oil. What good does it do to ban Russian oil if you're going to go buy it from Venezuela or Iran? Why don't we produce it here in the United States? It's cleaner and it's better. We should be doing that right here. But instead, we're not going to do that. And I'm going to turn it back over because I think it's about time to close. But I just want to I'll turn it over to the gentleman from Colorado.
Well, I just want to echo what you're saying and tell you that right now, the dictator who is the most threatening to us, we're going to pull away from his energy, and we're going to go with dictators who aren't quite as dangerous to us. That isn't a strategy. That's just looking at the wrong end of a revolver. I thank my friend. Go ahead.
I just want to remind, 51 kids are trapped after an orphanage is bombed and the director is killed. No heat or electricity, cold front coming. That is Putin's Ukraine, and we should be helping these people.
I thank the gentleman for his time tonight, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I thank the speaker for this time, and I yield back.